Hi, welcome to the Optimizing Your Brilliance podcast, where we get to the source of what makes people brilliant and explore how to eradicate the barriers that stop you from shining. By shining, I mean being at your absolute best in both work and life. You'll hear from business and thought leaders who bear all and share their insider secrets, along with my episodes focused on optimizing your performance, productivity, success, and well-being. My name is Estelle Reed, founder of Be, executive coach, speaker, and best-selling author of Inner Brilliance, Outer Shine, 10 Antidotes to Imposter Syndrome, Workaholism and Stress. So, if you're ready to take your work life to the next level, let's begin. Welcome. If this is your first time to the podcast, Optimizing Your Brilliance, I have just recently relaunched it, and to celebrate that relaunch, I am reading from my best-selling book. I've got permission from my publisher to read most of it, so not all of it, but there's a way in which you can access the stuff that I'm not going to be talking about, which is included in my free workbook, which if you are watching this on YouTube, you can download by scanning that QR code, or if you go over to my website, estellereed.com, you can access the free resource there, along with loads of other things. So, we're up to chapter 3 in my book. In chapter 3, the title is Understand What Causes You to Sink. So, quote, "Show me someone who has done something worthwhile and I'll show you someone who has overcome adversity." Lou Holtz. The purpose of the havening work that I do with my clients, which you will come on to in chapter 6, is to remove the traumas that are holding them back from shining, whether big or small. In my experience, the fewer traumas a person has on board the vessel, the more inclined they are to stay afloat, be resilient to the storms that work life can throw at us. In this chapter, we will begin to explore what trauma is and how it influences your personality, which includes your imposter syndrome thoughts and your workaholic habits. You'll also start to make the connections with the past experiences which are currently dulling your shine, the inner stuff affecting your outer stuff, i.e. the results you're getting. Finally, you will zero in further on your current coordinates. Where are you right now? Heading: Nature versus Nurture Model of Personality. One of the questions I'm often asked by my coachee's sponsor is, how long will it take for you to fix them? I'll say, that depends on what I find. What I mean by this is the amount of work, in inverted commas, required is determined by what the client has in their personal history. In chapter 6, we'll look at your ACE, which stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences score, which will give you a measure of how much trauma you have to deal with and the impact this has on your health and well-being. In the havening community, we talk about big and little traumas. Examples of big trauma could include the loss of a parent, a serious illness or accident as a child. Smaller traumas might include not being picked for the football or rounders team, which made you feel not good enough, or feeling the shame of answering a question wrong in school. All of that said, the meaning of the event is in the eye of the beholder. These smaller events could be big traumas for some individuals. So how do these events influence our personality? Maurice Massey, a marketing professor, sociologist and producer of training videos, was named of one of the most 27 influential workplace experts of all time. His research identified that there are 3 major periods a person will go through during personality formation, from ages 0 to 21. Throughout this time, as a result of significant emotional events, our personality, values and beliefs are formed. We'll look at values in more detail in Chapter 4. Some aspects of our personality are genetically encoded into our DNA. I forgot to read out the heading as well. We're on the nature section. For example, my brother is 14 years younger than me and we've never lived in the same household. I would describe my brother as a highly creative, cool, skateboarding, daredevil dude and a talented artist. As a teenager, he routinely had a limb in plaster and I suspect he now sets off metal detectors all over the place. At my dad's wedding reception, I was having afternoon tea and my brother was sat opposite me. I felt like Miss Stiff Knickers, comfortable in my corporate world, inept and tongue-tied when it came to art speak, dressed in my formal linen wear. We're opposites. When I talk to my brother in my head, I look and sound like Kevin Patterson, the teenage character created and played by the British comedian Harry Enfield. Do you remember? I was going to do an impression and then I can't remember what the impression was. Was it Mrs. Patterson? Mrs. Patterson? Something like that. I can remember his mate doing a walk like, what's his called? Liam from Oasis, and he'd spent some time in Manchester or something, or had been to a concert, but I used to absolutely love Harry Enfield. Anyway, I'm so uncool. I'm chatting away in my awkward style when I notice that we're holding our teacups in the same way. If you're watching this on YouTube, sticking out our little pinky at a right angle. This wasn't a nurture thing. I certainly don't recall, nor could I imagine my dad delivering table etiquette lessons. It's genetics. At some level, we are built similarly. Next heading, nurture, imprint phase. Based on Maurice Massey's research, the most important time in any person's life is during age 0 to 7. We refer to this as the imprint phase. Our personality development is influenced by those that nurture us during this period. This could be parents, carers, grandparents, siblings, teachers, friends, basically anyone in our life during that period. At the age 0 to 7, we believe whatever we are told. We have not yet developed our conscious analytical mind and therefore don't challenge the things that are communicated or the way we're being treated. In fact, they now believe that age 0 to 2, one of the reasons we don't have any memories during that period, although I would beg to differ because I can remember being in my pram, is that our brain hasn't developed enough, so we're certainly not conscious. So where are we up to? Believing in Santa Claus is a great example of this. We absorb what we're told like a sponge without questioning whether it's true or not. If a teacher is having a bad day and tells you with an accompanying bad mood, which triggers your fight or flight system, you're rubbish at spelling, the belief becomes encoded as the truth, regardless of any other prior future facts. For example, like the day you did get 10 out of 10 on your spelling test. These events create our map of the world, how we experience reality from our perspective. What we see, hear, feel, taste and smell is preceded through our filters, which create our reality. And our filters are our values, beliefs and experience. We delete or get rid of, distort, change the meaning, and generalise, put things in boxes based on what we've experienced before. So if you came to believe that you were rubbish at spelling as a result of one event which made you feel embarrassed and not good enough, every time you get a word wrong, that experience goes through your filter and is generalised into the box of, here's another example. of me being rubbish at spelling, or I'm not good enough. All the positive learning occasions where you got things right being conveniently deleted. And it's like that, isn't it? Have you ever noticed, maybe when you are in a PDP or someone gives you some feedback, they might give you 6 things that are positive, but you'll remember the one that stings, that one negative comment. Therefore, you need to be able to undelete things that you do well, to acknowledge, not deny, your treasure trove of gifts and talents. And I spoke about that in the previous episode. When you start the havening work, you will be adjusting and in some cases removing any filters that are dulling your shine and getting in the way of where you want to get to. Next heading, safe and stable, or unsafe and unpredictable. Between the ages of 0 and 7, we're learning about, for example, whether the world is a safe and stable place or not. For example, did you have to deal with unexpected or dramatic changes such as a divorce or relocating to another area? I've heard many adult stories where they didn't feel safe growing up. One client observed his father beating his mother up. There was a constant tension in the household. He said, "I never knew what was going to happen next." This fear followed him into adult life, into the C-suite. He was constantly on edge, waiting for a fight to erupt. This made him difficult to be around because he was habitually tense and on edge and argumentative, both as a colleague and at home. Once the triggers were havened away, people said he'd mellowed. He retained the ability to tackle tough issues, but was less emotive when doing so. He also said he felt like himself. This was because his limiting beliefs, behaviours and feelings had been dissipated by havening the source events in his childhood. Often clients report feeling more like themselves, and that's because they've offloaded the baggage that was weighing them down, patterns and programs of behaviour that were meant to help us survive initially, which have become outdated. It's like pressing the factory reset button on your phone and getting rid of all that unnecessary data so that it works more efficiently. Next heading, loved or rejected. During the imprint period, age 0 to 7, we're learning in our childhood relationships whether we're loved, liked, cared for, cherished or rejected. If you weren't made to feel special growing up, or perhaps you were ignored, what conclusion did you come to? Were you made to feel like a worthwhile person? For example, sometimes parents can connect with another child more, simply because they can relate to a nature aspect of their personality. Again, I've havened countless client memories relating to parents spending more time with one child because of a hobby. The other child takes this to mean that they're not loved as much as their sibling, that they're not good enough. These strong emotional experiences and beliefs then continue to weigh us down unconsciously. And every time the adult is reminded that they're not loved, liked, cared for, cherished, good enough, they re-trigger the old feelings from childhood. Next heading, success or failure. When we turn to our capabilities and reputation, can we do things that everyone else can do, or are we different? What are we known for? Class clown, brain box, or something else? Are we succeeding or failing? We begin to form our identity around what we're capable of and how we're perceived. These experiences we have typically at school or during our recreational time can influence this. I was branded a slow learner. I can remember being sat on the thick table, as Peter Kay would say. I'm sure he described my table in his sketch. I was the kid that I was with the kids that backfired endless noxious gases, sat in yesterday's clothing which they'd slept and peed in the night before. As an adult, it breaks my heart to think about the neglect this child must have been experiencing. And then someone else who bathed in and drank goat's milk. The child's parents were clearly innovators when you consider all the food intolerances we have today. I was the weird kid in hand-me-down clothes with no dad at home. Divorce wasn't the done thing back then. I was confused by the situation. There was no big departure with suitcases under arm. So I told people he'd been taken away by the fire brigade. The teacher called my mum into school. And if you're thinking, well, that's a bit strange. Why would you say your father's been taken away by the fire brigade? It was because I didn't know what had happened. So, back in the day, in families, you didn't talk about those kinds of things. You certainly didn't talk about mental health or feelings or any of that. You just kind of smoothed over things back in the 70s and 80s and pretended like things hadn't happened. And so my way of making sense of that was to make up a really bizarre story. I don't know why fire engines. It's really strange. But in my mind, all I knew is we'd moved house and my dad was no longer coming back to this particular home. And so I made up a story to make sense of it. As I say, Mum was called in. Your child's telling strange stories. We were all part of a special needs group. Being part of this group didn't make me feel special. It made me feel separate from the rest of the class. The mature adult in me would say that at least I belonged somewhere. Taken off for extra lessons in various parts of the school, the teacher's staff room was my favourite. It was in the attic of the school building, and you got to it via a painted shiny black stone staircase. It was like making an ascent to the heavens, and both fascinating and terrifying at the same time. There were casual, low-rise, brown, public authority-looking chairs arranged in a horseshoe. The room was filled with cigarette smoke and interesting bits of chatter about the school pupils. I'm sure this is where my fascination for people began. I used to get seated up to a formica bench which overlooked the school playground, where it seemed everyone else was out playing. Instead of focusing on the extracurricular activity, I'd either be daydreaming or earwigging. Consequently, I never won any awards for academic achievement. What I know now, though, is that I hadn't hit on what I was naturally good at. More on that in chapter 4. So not about what I was naturally good at, but what you're naturally good at. Next heading, nurture, the modelling phase. At around age 8, the child begins to question the world around them, hence the dissipation of their beliefs in Santa. Ages 8 to 13 is called the modelling phase, where the child copies the behaviours of people they admire. You may have seen some children pretending to be a teacher or repeating phrases used by their parents. You may have heard your parents say, "Don't do as I do. Let me get this right. Do as I say, not as I do." But it's a bit like monkey see, monkey do, isn't it? I can remember a client telling me about their daughter. She announced that she was sat next to the most popular girl in school. My client's heart sank because they'd heard some unsavoury stories about the girl from the other school mums. They'd also seen how she operated. She'd draw the innocent in with flattery and then turn the tables. All of a sudden, her 10-year-old was taking a keen interest in the way she looked and what she wore for school. Then, one evening, whilst she was propped up in bed following a bedtime story, she burst into tears. She said, "Natalie said my eyebrows look like slugs, my dress is tight, and that I'm a slat." You heard that right, slat. "What's a slat, mummy?" That's not a typo. Funnily enough, my client didn't tend to use words like slag or slut, whichever word it was meant to be, but here was her daughter expanding her vocabulary and being influenced by someone she barely knew. Nurture, the socialisation phase. The final stage of personality development in this model is called the socialisation phase. ages 14 to 21. This is when we are influenced primarily by our friends. You hear of teenagers getting in with the wrong crowd and doing whatever the rest of the friends are doing, such as underage drinking, wear a particular brand of clothing, or liking certain genres of music. I have evidence of my socialisation phase tattooed on my rear. Bizarrely, it's of a bumblebee, and hadn't realised I'd branded myself with my company name until several years into my business. I still, even now, forget it's there because I can't see it. But I've clearly got a thing about bees, as my business name is Bee as well. But Bee with 3 E's, by the way. To be honest, it looks more like a bespectacled alien. I had it done following a drunken night out with my tattooed boyfriend. I know, very original. The incident took place in a seedy parlour in Morecambe. I had to kneel over an orange plastic chair, and partway through I can remember thinking, what am I doing? My mum went mental when I got home, telling me that tattoos are for rough people. We know, of course, that's very different these days, don't we? They weren't the pieces of art that they are today. It was out of character for me. I was experimenting. I forget it's there most of the time, and I suppose I could get it removed, but it serves as a reminder of my wilder days. So, as you read the last few pages, did the stories, metaphors, or questions trigger any memories? So, this is the bit where there are series, if you're wanting to do some further work as you go throughout this book. So what I said in the previous episode is, because you're going to be listening to this, it seems pointless me going through all the activities, but also it enables me to read all the other text out to you, because as I say, I've got permission to read some text, just not all of it, by my publisher. But what you can do is you can access the activities that are in the text by downloading my free workbook, which is you can find it at estellereed.com. Right, next heading. When faking it doesn't help you make it. Many self-help books will share strategies to help you learn to manage limiting beliefs, behaviours and feelings. Put up with them. Fake it till you make it and all that jazz. I've used such a strategy and believe it can be helpful. But I ended up exhausting myself because there was too much stuff to fake, too many thoughts to squash or let go of. The good news is that there's an opportunity to cheat and rewire your brain so that the old patterns don't recur. To prevent the daily grind of fighting inner stuff so that you shine naturally without thinking. Again, more about this in chapter 6. I was reminded recently what a mess I used to be as we flew to Crete. I'd spent many years trying to manage my anxiety. So, fake it till you make it. It's difficult, isn't it, with anxiety? It's hard to fake it till you make it with anxiety because it's just such an unconscious process. It was an endless losing battle, trying to talk myself out of feeling anxious. I couldn't enjoy what was right in front of me because I'd be so incapacitated by my limiting beliefs, behaviours and feelings. I can remember taking a flight as a young adult to the Canaries at a point in my life when I had panic attacks. I was wedged between two girlfriends as they chatted merrily, oblivious to my ongoing panic. I felt so embarrassed that I had panic attacks. The only person that knew about them was my mum, so I was on my own when it came to this attack. No sympathetic voice to calm me down. I felt claustrophobic, like the space on the plane was closing in on me, and then the person in front reclined the seat. Don't you just love it? I haven't experienced that for a while. I think they must have adjusted plane seats, mustn't they, so you can't do it anymore. But back in the day you could, and the seat would be like that. Even less room to breathe. I kept imagining myself running for the exits like some crazy lady demanding. I can laugh now, but at the time it wasn't funny. And seriously, if this is you right now, there definitely is help available. There definitely are things that you can do, because I don't panic anymore. But I had to do my deep change work, which was the havening work that we'll come on to. Where am I up to? I kept imagining myself running for the exits like some crazy lady demanding that they make an emergency landing because I felt like I was going to die. Added to the fact I was convinced the plane was going to crash. I was a mess. The thing with panic is you can't seem to regulate your breath, which in turn exasperates things physiologically. Your pulse quickens, your palms go sweaty, then you start to feel dizzy, nauseous, because you've upset the natural balance of oxygen and carbon dioxide. I kept thinking, where's my paper bag to puke and or breathe into? Because that was a mental health solution back in the 90s. Beta blockers and a brown paper bag. I only took the tablets once as they made me feel worse. I spent the whole flight managing the rise and fall of a panic attack, sat squashed in my seat, going from white to red interchangeably. Next heading, when inner stuff dulls your shine. On my continued quest to manage myself, I went on a meditation course. It was all the rage. Every business was running internal mindfulness courses as a one-size-fits-all cure for stress, so I thought I ought to get with the program. I stuck out like a sore thumb in class. I'd missed the memo about the standard attire being sweatpants and a baggy top. I attended the workshop in between clients, so was dressed in my usual corporate uniform. Miss Stiff Knickers made an appearance again. I was invited to kneel on the floor with the rest of the group, but chose to stay perched on my chair. My dress was too tight anyway. I bought into a good chunk of what I was taught. In fact, I will be talking about the benefits of meditation in chapter 10. My only reservation was that the teachers didn't look congruent. So what I mean by congruent, everything is lined up. So, is a person practicing what they preach? Do they look like they're very peaceful and this person didn't, and I'll explain why in a moment. So in other words, when we talk about congruency, does what's coming out my mouth line up with my body language? So the teachers didn't look congruent with their product, which meant to me that at some level the techniques weren't fully working. They all looked as though anger was simmering. I shouldn't be laughing. Anger was simmering beneath the surface. Whilst they were giving it on and using their happy clappy, do you remember Rod, Jane and Freddie? From Rainbow, an 80s kids TV programme, voices, let's all pretend to be happy, clappy. I'm waiting for the lead instructor to explode, like in the movie Anger Management, where Adam Sandler goes to see his childhood nemesis monk friend at the temple and a fight erupts between them. Towards the end of the course, I decided to get something off my chest. I asked why they didn't get rid of the thought trigger to stop it from arising in the first place using a technique like EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique. I hadn't even learnt about havening at that stage. One delegate jumped to the teacher's defence and started slapping her forehead. Oh, you mean like angry tapping? Yeah, sure, that'll work. Oh dear, nobody likes a smart aleck. The sweatpants brigade turned and glared at me from the floor. I'd broken the cardinal sin of the group. I dared to challenge the teacher. The instructor had a mini internal explosion, brief ripples of anger wafting across her face, the telltale vein pounding on her forehead. I didn't fit here, but that was okay, and I made my exit. Next heading, cheating change. The flight to Crete, wonderful. No longer claustrophobic or worrying about the plane crashing, excited to be going on holiday, sucking up the reality of being with my beautiful family. Not an anxious thought in sight. able to be in what I was in as opposed to being consumed by limiting beliefs, behaviours and feelings. This wasn't something I had to think through to make happen. It occurred because I got rid of my stress triggers using havening, and that's why it feels like cheating. If you're wondering what the stress trigger was, in the 70s, when you stayed away from home with your baby, you didn't have all the paraphernalia that's available today. You simply pulled out a drawer halfway out and made your baby's bed in there. My memory of this was crystal clear. It was like being in a coffin with the frame of the chest close to my face like that. It felt high up and like I was going to fall out because the drawer was slanted at a 25-degree angle. This is where I learned to be claustrophobic and had a fear of heights. I was safe, I didn't fall out, I'd simply attached an unhelpful meaning to the experience. Outdated beliefs and coping strategies. Sometimes as children we come to the wrong conclusion about things because we keep our thoughts in our heads, or there isn't anyone around to give us that adult perspective and reasoning. The problem with this, though, is that the limiting behaviour, belief and feeling is set up for life, particularly if it occurs in that impressionable stage, age 0 to 7 of personality formation. These events are typically one moment in time. They're not who we are, and yet they can define us right through adulthood unless we learn to let them go. If you were a parent, give the gift of present listening, allowing your child to talk in a safe and non-judgmental space where they are not made to feel silly, can help them make sense of their thoughts and feelings. One of the traits I notice in my clients is that they weren't listened to growing up. They then end up in my office expressing thoughts and feelings which should have been aired long ago. As a result of these intense emotional childhood experiences, we develop coping strategies so that we avoid re-experiencing the bad feeling. Take, for example, the director who was told off at school for making a mistake. He'd misheard the teacher's instruction and drew in his reading book as opposed to his exercise book. He was made to stand at the front of the class with his hands on his head. At that moment, he felt intense public humiliation and shame. The limiting belief which was born out of this was, I get things wrong. The limiting behaviour or the strategy that was created was, I must get everything right, and I mean everything. He had multiple to-do lists so that nothing got missed, including one which listed routine tasks such as put petrol in car, mow the lawn, take the dog for a walk. These coping strategies are fine provided they're effective. The constant listing of things to do was stressing him out. And I'm an advocate of a to-do list, but as with most things, everything in moderation. The other downside of coping strategies and trying to manage our way around bad feelings is that we can't control when we're triggered. I was coaching this gentleman because he'd reached a tipping point when, at a recent quality audit at work, his department had been marked down for a minor non-compliance. He'd got something wrong in his mind. This was fed back at a board meeting, and the poor chap was re-triggered into feeling that same public humiliation and shame he'd experienced as a 5-year-old boy in the classroom. If we remove the trigger using havening, we remove the need to adopt a coping strategy. In some circumstances, we can simultaneously remove the limiting belief, behaviour and feeling. One of the benefits of adversity is that we learn great skills. This client had learned to be super organised and chose a career in compliance so that he wouldn't be at risk of getting things wrong. I'm often asked, am I going to stop being good at, in this case, being organised if I get rid of the trigger? In my experience, you'll always be able to access the skills. The difference will be that you'll no longer feel a compulsion to behave in a limiting way. In his case, overdoing the to-do list to feel safe, relaxed, and not at risk of making a mistake. It will become a choice. Next heading, snapshot. I see the majority of my coaching clients from my home office. When I open my front door, unconsciously, I'm taking a mental snapshot of how the client is. Are they better, worse, or about the same? If we work on the premise that state of mind drives our behaviour, for example, if I'm in an anxious state of mind whilst presenting, this could damage my performance as a trainer. State of mind becomes important. Similarly, if you're a salesperson and you're feeling depressed, it could make it difficult to enthusiastically sell your product or service, resulting in poor sales performance. When I'm taking a snapshot of my client, I'm checking out how they're holding themselves, both in their torso, but primarily in the face, their outer stuff. Our body language and how we speak expresses what we're really thinking and feeling at an unconscious level, our inner stuff. For example, if I wanted to finish a conversation, my body might begin leaning towards the door like this to indicate that I'm wanting to leave the room. So it's funny actually, rereading this book. I wrote it in 2019 before the pandemic, and all of my work was face-to-face back then. And then obviously the pandemic hit, and very quickly all my work shifted online, apart from the speaking events that I do. But it's interesting. So if you're a business leader listening to this, and I appreciate you might be working with people on Teams or on Zoom, whatever else, it is amazing what detail you can also pick up just face to face. I'm sure if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see from my body language when I'm trying to stifle a laugh. Also, even if you're listening to this in your earbuds, you'll be able to hear the change in tonality in my voice, but also when I've got a smile coming on. So it's not just about, being face to face. There's so much information that we can access also online, but through listening to people as well. When I begin working with a client, I ask them to write down a snapshot of where they are now, their position A. I ask for a warts and all account. I want to know what are the limiting beliefs, behaviours and feelings which are holding them back, what's dulling their shine. I ask them to tell me exactly as it is, to avoid filtering. This is their first set of coordinates. I do this because unless we get to the truth of what's happening right now, how can we begin to solve it? How do we know what we need to journey away from? This is where your bridge or self-awareness is useful again. Okay, I'm going to skip the action steps. So there's just a little asterisk to remind you that if any memories pop up, make sure that you use the crow's nest position. So this was something I spoke about in the previous episode. So the crow's crow's nest position is where you either go above an experience or to the side of an experience as you are accessing memories from your past. And what that does is it reduces the emotional impact of that experience. This is a bit of NLP for you folks, neuro-linguistic programming. So we learn to dissociate from the intensity of feelings the further away we are from something. So take, for example, this morning I went downstairs and there was a great big beetle on its back squirming around, and I did a bit of I gave it a wide berth to walk around it, and then said to my husband, will you rescue that beetle? It's on its back. But the point being, the further we are away, the easier and more comfortable our feelings are. So if any memories are cropping up as I am going through my book, stay objective and distant from the memory. Avoid analysing or ruminating, but make a note of it in the Inner Brilliance How to Shine journal, which, as I say, you can access on that QR code, or if you're listening to this, estellereid.com. And save the memory for the Havening chapter, where you'll be able to erase it. Next heading, reality check. I'm not going to get all Rod, Jane and Freddie on you, promising a panacea for every single limiting belief, behaviour and feeling. Emotions serve a purpose, as I will explain in chapter 9. They drive action and help us experience the light and shade of life. For example, it's not that you'll never experience anger, but responding to your colleagues free of the compulsion to behave in a brusque or a timid way could become a reality for you, provided you can get to the original trigger in your childhood. Also, I don't believe in being on a never-ending quest for perfection. That's damaging, hopeless and unsatisfying. I tend to get rid of whatever is getting in the way of me journeying towards my current destination. I'll be coming on to goals and vision in chapter 5. And make a course change in the right direction. Then, when I set a new direction, which presents new challenges, I reapply the technique within that context. So thinking about my most recent vision attainment, so if you are connected with me online, you'll know that was relocating to Cumbria. One of the things that I had to haven to make a course correction so that I could stay on track, move towards this vision of living in our dream location, was to get rid of some past events relating to when I first lived in the Lake District, which was when I was about 11. And I won't go into all the story right here and now, but long story short is I was worried about that same thing occurring with my daughter. I didn't want her to experience what I experienced. And there were moments where I was ready to pull the plug on the relocation. Now, after I'd done that work, I was able to stay on track and move towards our vision and to achieve the vision, which we achieved December 2023. The other good news, if you're sat there, and I've got a free event coming up actually in September, which is really taking, so if you are a bit of a visionary, and you've got a burning goal, ambition, an area of your life that you want to take, to the next level, then please do attend that complimentary webinar. Again, you can get it on that QR code. It will be listed there. One of the things that's important, as I say, if you're wanting to take things to the next level, is to clear the blocks that are preventing you from leading basically your very best work life. And, if I'd not done that havening work, I'm not sure I would be sat in my study as I am now, looking out at the Lake District National Park. I'm also, and, we can let fear get in the way, can't we, of the things that we really want in life. And if I said to you, my daughter has just finished secondary school, and I was really, really afraid of disrupting and unsettling her life, and it's been her best school. She's not wanted to leave because she just finished her GCSEs. And so, don't use that crystal ball to predict negative outcomes. You were in charge of your life, and we worked our damnness to make sure that actually life was going to be really good for her. We let her choose a school, we supported her all along the way. We made her priority during our relocation, and it's all turned out good. So you can mitigate those bumps in the road by clearing up your own crap, basically your inner limitations, but also being clear about where it is that you want to head towards, which, as I say, is coming up in chapter 5, I think it is. So where are we up to? So I've said that I don't believe in perfection, going on this never-ending journey, but I do believe in havening out the bumps, the inner blocks, so that you can move towards destination joy. Next heading, the Inner Brilliance Outer Shine journal. As part of this process, it would be helpful if you could begin journaling. You can download the journal at either estelleread.com or, as I say, on that QR code that I've mentioned. We will begin looking at this in more detail in chapter 8. Some of my clients bring their journal each month and we work through all the situations when they've been triggered emotionally, i.e. with something that's caused them to ruminate or react in a limiting way. In the early days, it can be tricky for some detecting what needs to be worked on because they're still on autopilot, they're not yet tuned into the information coming in on their bridge. If you have the luxury of either a Fitbit or some other wearable technology which can measure your pulse, you can spot when you've been triggered emotionally. I was working with one gentleman who wasn't quite accepting that he'd been triggered in a board meeting. It was the first thing he told me about during his session. This is important from a coaching perspective because often clients can't get on and do the work during a session until they get the thing that's troubling them most off the chest. I asked him how he felt about what his colleague had said to him. He'd accused him of being insensitive with an employee. His response was, "Not bothered." Whilst he said this, he began bunching his jaw. His body was telling me otherwise. This was a guy who preferred hard, tangible evidence. None of that gut feeling, mumbo-jumbo, ethereal stuff. I asked him if I could see what his heart rate was doing during the meeting. He physically shrank in his chair. When we viewed the report, it looked as though he was sprinting. Now he was ready to talk, no longer stuck in denial. So, finally, when I'm working with clients, sometimes they will say, "I had a wonderful childhood and my parents were good people," and I get that entirely. I am a parent and I hope that our child would show the same loyalty. Although, to be honest, I have screwed up. I am not in denial about that. The more and more you parent, the more you realise it is probably the most important job that you will ever do, but it's also the most challenging job because you're always on and you're not a perfect being and you will screw up. So relax and be easy if you're a parent. Oh, this is what I've said in my book. At least I'm consistent, aren't I? Parent is both the toughest and most magical job. Whilst you're with them, you're in role the whole time. Every little behaviour and feeling being observed and logged away for a later date. It is the most important role you can play, in my humble opinion, in the development of any human being. Doing the work I do with clients has made me a paranoid parent. It really has. I can see all the opportunities for screwing our daughter up. We are by no means perfect. Our daughter is very self-aware and she'll openly tell us when we do screw up, along with all the other human beings that have come into contact with her. This is because what excites or makes one person laugh can cause minor or major trauma in others. For those of you that think your parents or carers were crap, I hear you too. Summary of key points for chapter 3. The more baggage we have on board as a result of minor or major trauma, the more risk we are of sinking. Offloading baggage using havening can make you more resilient. Use the crow's nest to stay objectively removed from your baggage. Taking a deep dive into baggage without applying a technique can make you feel crappy. Start using the Inner Brilliance How to Shine journal to note when you are experiencing any limiting beliefs, behaviours or feelings. Our personality is a mix of both nature, things that are genetically encoded, and nurture. We can change the limiting nurture aspects of our personality using Havening. And then finally, relax and be easy. Most human beings have some baggage. It's part of the nurture aspect of our personality. So, that's the end of Jack and Ori for today. Spot the Gen Xer. If you're laid there on your sunbed in the sun, that's what I imagine when I'm recording this, because I hope it's going to be helpful for you over the summer holidays. And you're thinking, I cannot be bothered with all of this work. I can do the work with you, and I can do all the heavy lifting with my Shine one-to-one coaching program, which you can find at estellereid.com. So thanks for listening, and I will see you again for the next chapter, which is aligning towards your stars. Okay, take care. Bye. If you'd like to be notified when the next episode drops, remember to subscribe. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone who might benefit. Finally, if any of these topics have sparked your interest and you'd like to work with me, you can apply for a free discovery call at estellereid.com. Let's see if we're a good fit. You'll also find plenty of free resources there. I'm Estelle Reid, executive coach, speaker and best-selling author, and this has been the Optimizing Your Brilliance podcast. Thanks for listening. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered professional advice. Please consult with a qualified professional for any specific advice related to your situation.